is personal, or it's about the interim program?
Any question?
Any
question?
Michigan State or U of M? Let's start off. Highly contentious.
My allegiances are all out of state, so I try not to.
It's
I
not
try not to go that fray.
It's not the Ohio State, though, is it?
No.
Well, then we're all good.
If it was, I wouldn't admit that. That's smart.
That's 1 point already. He's smart enough not to hear it.
That's right. That's okay. Well, people will come in. So yeah, anything you have. We've been talking a little bit to Pastor about the decisions that we're making, about trying to decide, do we want to just charge on and move forward, or do we want to spend some time figuring out where we've been and where we're going? So there's a lot of questions for us, but those are questions that we can...
So you've already asked him that question?
No, I didn't ask him the question. It's just that part of coming is sharing with him where we're at and telling, I explained to Pastor Prout that we're looking at a vacancy position and we're looking at the interim program. So...
I'm gonna go sit by him, because he looks awful lonely sitting there all by
Thank you,
himself.
Doug.
Then
That's
he-
very touchy-feely of you, Doug. I'm glad you did that.
And that's a point for your husband on that one.
Yes.
See, I'll give him a point on that one.
See, already you know that he's my husband. For 5 years we've worked ministry and people didn't know we were related.
We come in together and go home together, but she went one direction, and people knew both of us and had no idea we were married.
That's
That's all right. That's all right.
And we were busy.
There are manifold gifts in the church, and they are used in a variety of manners. So,
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
are we? Yeah, that's fine. Are we starting?
Yes,
We
because...
can go, because usually people...
Okay. Well, you know my name, right? I am the son of a. We could get into genealogy. I see when I think of. Remember what I told you on the phone? I see when I think of my English father and all his English heritage. I'm the only child, the son of Christian parents. I was born in the northern suburbs, grew up in Royal Oak, went through the Royal Oak public schools. I was baptized and confirmed at St. Paul Lutheran Church, which is essentially, if you're familiar with the Royal Oak area, it's pretty much right in downtown Royal Oak, always has been. Downtown Royal Oak is a little different scene than it was in years past, but it was active back then, active now for much different reasons. I started college and then exited a little bit, trying to determine which direction I was going in. Then I eventually completed a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Communications. I was encouraged, I believe, ultimately by God, but through people like my home pastor at St. Paul, to enter the ministry. I did so by entering St. Louis, the St. Louis Seminary, Concordia in St. Louis. I graduated from there. During my time there, I served a 2-year vicarage at, of all places, Panama. My classmates, for some reason, were teasing me, telling me I was going to end up on the Mexican-Texas border in McAllen, or if you were familiar with the territory down there. I'm not so much. That's why they figured they were going to play a joke on me and send me down there. So you're going to McAllen or one of those places down there. Well, we fooled them, didn't we? I did that and much better, all the way down to Panama. It was a very interesting experience in a lot of different ways. It did both English. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, good. We did both English and Spanish-speaking ministry there. Upon graduation from the seminary, it had always been my desire and goal to continue my education in psychology and so become somewhat dual qualified both as a minister and as a psychologist. So I achieved both a Master of Arts in Counseling and thereafter a Doctorate of Psychology on the West Coast at George Fox University. I went there because it was a unique program that attempted to interplay Christian values with the field of psychology and psychological findings and psychological work. So I did want a Christian basis, and it was a long ways out there, but I was happy I went out there because it was a wonderfully supportive Christian community in what is sometimes seen as a very alien subject. Come on in. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Which, as compared to what is sometimes seen as a very alien subject, Christianity and religious faith. My first call upon completing my education was in Mississippi to Oxford, of course, home of Old Miss.
Yes.
And thereafter, I served a congregation near New Orleans, in Hammond, Louisiana. I'd say it's a suburb, but it's a little farther out than that. It's, if you're familiar with topography of Louisiana, it's on the north shore. It's on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain. So that's a little ways out, but not far. From there, I received a call pretty much back to home, to Berkeley, Michigan, and served there for 10 years. I took a leave of absence to tend to my ailing mother, being the only child, and we're from very small families. And of course, as you know, as well, families are very, for the most part, very separated and, you know, spread all over. So I kind of was it, and I happily served that, but it was a long stint. I was with my mother pretty much full time for 7 years. And the Lord took her about a year ago. It was an interesting journey. I think about that every day, in both positive and it's hard to make that journey all that you want it to be. But it was quite a learning experience. Mom and I were reasonably close, so that helped the situation. But she lost a little bit of her mind, of course, and by the time she died, she was 94, so she lived quite a long life, but she did lose, as people typically do by that age, seemingly, she lost a bit of her mind, so that made it a bit challenging. And, but anyway, so I'm making some inroads to return into ministry. Interim ministry for me might be one of those routes. So, and I've been encouraged by my fellow pastors who know me well as the Mission District to pursue that. So here I am. And part of the reason I'm here is that Dr. Casper, who I believe you've met already, was he not here in January?
Yeah.
I believe, if I noted that on the record. Dr. Casper, as you know, has recommended me for your consideration to assist you in an interim period. Now that was probably TMI, too much information, but that kind of gives you an overview. I presume that answers some of your questions, some of your curiosities. I'm single, I remain that way. I've taken the Pauline route to my life at this point. As Paul said, I can make it alone and single. The rest of you go ahead and get married. And I guess that's the advice I've given all my friends who are married, and I remain single. I'm happily that, you know, I'm still living, so who knows what the future holds, but I'm happy where I'm at, so be it. It certainly gives me a lot of time to give to our Lord's work, which I've attempted to do so.
We have had an overview of the intern program, but what do you see as, what excites you about the intern program? What do you see that it really, if you were selling it from your perspective to us, what do you think?
Which to some degree I am.
What are your sort of top three things that you think it brings?
Training, focus, and gifts.
Can you elaborate?
Well, Penny, you just asked me to list them. I listed them. Next question, I listed them for you.
Right, next question is to elaborate.
Well, yeah, I sense you folks, if I can be that informal, and you as now increasingly coming to the point where you're officially chartered congregation, are probably trying to decide between the two. I looked last night at some of the materials that I have for my training, and I sensed they were a little biased towards interim ministry. Not that that would perturb me, but in a comparison of vacancy versus interim, it seemed like it was a little biased towards interim ministry, which is all right. But so I hesitated to go through that. We could have put that up on the board, or I could have gone through that. I didn't know that that was all that helpful. I'm not sure now which order I gave you those in.
Training.
Okay, I'll get to that in a minute. Let's do focus first. Focus for intentional interim ministry, And let's use the words in the title, intentional. It is versus a situation in which one simply says, okay, what do we need to cover here? And intentional interim minister will necessarily, if he follows the program, come in and say to the congregation, okay, let's take a look at where you're at, where you've been, and where you wish to go. So that it's intentional on a focus on encouraging a congregation to evaluate themselves, assess themselves, take a look at themselves. Now, you know, we'll acknowledge to those assembled here today, you and I have already had a fairly lengthy conversation this past week in which you talked about the energy and the dynamic of this congregation who's ready to go into ministry. So I guess I want to caution and say, you know, whether it be me or someone else in an intentional interim position, I don't think anyone attempts to extend this unnecessarily, this process. However, that's a focus, to have a congregation really look at themselves if they haven't done that. Now maybe they have already, so that would put even lessen the time required for that. But that's a focus. Unique to IIM, if I use the abbreviation. A little different then from simply a vacancy situation in that I guess most of us would see that as certainly fulfilling your needs for the moment, but typically what would that be? Someone coming in and saying, okay, what do we need to cover here? The interim ministry will say, what are your pastoral needs? What are your needs of pastoral care? But as well, what we're looking at. Interim ministers don't simply volunteer and are taken, they're chosen and selected. Good morning, please come in.
Kids coming in to join us. We might not have enough seats, but come in and hang out. Come in, guys.
Because they didn't sit in the middle.
I don't know if they like that. Okay. We just asked Pastor about intentional interim ministry program, guys, and so he's just giving an overview of what he thinks the benefits are to our congregation. Men volunteer themselves to be considered, but they're, few are chosen. I'm not sure that's exactly true, but you know, they're chosen given not only their pastoral experience, but what gifts and talents they bring to interim ministry. And so it's expected that such ministers have certain abilities that can be utilized in situations like this. They're accustomed to congregational challenges. They're accustomed to congregational conflicts. They're accustomed to evaluation and assessment of where a congregation is, where they should go. So that's gifts. I guess the last thing is training then. And interim ministers are specifically and for some length of time trained. I'm still in a process of training. Training always continues. I mean, it is a hallmark of the interim intentional minister that he continues to be trained throughout his time as serving as one. Okay, there we are. Does that give you a little bit of a distinction? Because I sense, if I haven't been told exactly, that that's kind of the question in the middle of the room. Are we going to do vacancy or are we going to do IIM? You know, and I hope Dr. Rob or Dr. Casper, as I know him and he knows me, is a rather intense man. I would imagine that when he was with you, he gave you some of the same reasoning, did he not? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I would expect that he could have been a good spokesperson for the program, and I imagine he was. Does that help? Not only to you, Penny, but the rest of the room. Are there any other questions that still remain after that very brief sketch?
A very quiet group here.
So I have a question then, and it might be outside of that. I look at what's been done by the Leadership Launch Committee, and it looks like that we're at this point ready to go ahead with ministry and ready to do 5-2. Are you able to help us with pursuing the 5-2 ministry plan?
To the extent that I know it. I'm guessing you guys are oriented a little bit more in it than I have not utilized it before, but I'm familiar with it. So I would imagine that I can play catch-up quite quickly. But I'm familiar with it. I've read through the background of the program. It seems like an innovative and interesting approach. And I'm aware that there's at least a number in the congregation who are not only prepared but are looking to utilize that, particularly in your outreach in the local community. So yes, the answer to your question would be yes.
Any other questions? So my next question is, you have people here who are really interested and willing to go forward. We have people who are not here and don't know what they want to do, who have been part of us. Is it possible to reach those people and either find out whether they want to come back and join us, or whether they're at least pursuing to continue a relationship with Jesus in some place?
Okay, if I understand you correctly, you're speaking to people who have at least temporarily left the fellowship.
That's
Is that correct?
Yes.
Sure. Approach them, if that hasn't been done so already, ask them, politely, without any, politely and pleasantly, where are they at in their Christian life right now, their Christian walk?
And do you feel that that would be better coming from someone who's already here, or an intentional interim pastor who can show interest on behalf of the congregation?
I think someone like myself would be very willing to lead that process. I think it would be important if it serves as an invitation back into the fellowship that includes someone who has been and is in the fellowship. So I think the utilization of an interim minister could be helpful in guiding that process. I think the invitation would be helpful to come from perhaps both parties, both the interim minister at this time, as well as members currently of the fellowship. It's going to be easier for someone else to walk in on someone like that and say, "Hey, it's been so long since we've seen you. How have you been? We've been wondering about you. We've been praying about you." Rather than me saying, "I'm sorry, what's your name?" Just upon meeting them.
But you can help facilitate that and,
As I've said, I think there's a number of, actually quite a number, there's a number of, dare I say, titles or positions that the interim minister might fulfill. I think one of the primary ones would be enabler, to enable the congregation in what they decide they wish to do and in which directions they want to go. Now, there's a variety of ways of enabling that. I don't want to overemphasize too much the assessment stage in things, but one of those is, where are we at and where are we going? Now, I understand, and I've gotten that sense already that, there's been a certain amount of that groundwork laid already. Fine, then let's go over that. Briefly. Let's not spend a lot of time on it. I don't want to make anybody nervous and say, well, Pastor David's going to come and, involve us in a lot of surveys, questionnaires, and paperwork. No, by no means. Ministry is where I wish to go. It sounds like ministry, obviously, is where you people wish to go. So, that's not going to be the primary focus of our time. But nonetheless, I think that's a helpful process, and it is certainly one that is integral to interim ministry. Clearly, an interim pastor is a pastor, so he certainly is concerned about pastoral care and utilizing that towards the progress of the congregation in the way they wish to go. In all that I know about interim ministry, you utilize every opportunity towards that goal. The sermons may revolve around the congregation and its future and where it's headed. Bible classes, other opportunities, as well as working with, the officers and the various committees of the congregation towards that end as well.
Are you calling on me, sir?
I'm looking right at you. May that suffice as such.
I'm not sure if the job description defines it, but how many hours a week would you be available to commit to the job? I don't know how much would be required, but.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I mean, as it has been described to me by Dr. Casper, and this is subject to revision and change, but he seemed to be looking at it as a half-time position. That, I mean, I'm open to more than that, and I'm available. I will caution you, I have a very small number of obligations that I would like to meet. I mean, for instance, I'm going to, of all places, Sarnia, Canada, I believe in 2 weeks to preach. I'm very grateful that once people realized that I wasn't so involved, to be honest with you, with my mother's situation, they say, oh, Pastor Dave's available, then the phone started ringing, and I'm very thankful for that in a number of ways. Canada asked me to come based on a high recommendation they had of me, and I say that to not to stroke my own ego, but back in January, they said, we'd like you to come in March. They were awaiting a pastor who's already been assigned to them. And I said, fine, I need to meet that obligation. I have a very few others, but may I say very few, and most all of them in the very near future. Other than that, my availability is fairly unlimited. I say that caution, with some caution.
How far is your commute?
It's doable, but it's a little farther than I'd like.
Are you living in Royal Oak still?
Troy, I'm in Troy.
That's even worse, a little bit.
Yeah, by a little bit, yeah. But understand, I mean, you know, interim ministry can be done from a fairly lengthy distance too. I mean, interim ministry sometimes can be done out of state. Sometimes it can be done on the other side of the state. So while this is a bit of a lengthy commute, and I would acknowledge that to you, I can tell you right now, it's excellent on, it's not too bad on Sunday mornings. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I had extra time and I thought, you know, I better not get there too soon, but I want to get there soon enough. We had, no, you guys changed positions.
Trying to confuse you.
Well, they're going to get all sorts of facial expressions on that camera, aren't they? This is going to be really entertaining. You'd say, look at the face he made now. You and I had that conversation, that keep the phone number handy in case you get lost, you know? So I got off at, what is it, Godfredson Road? And took North Territory to see a little bit of the landscape. Didn't see much, but
We
you
could
know.
have picked up Linda. Right by your house.
Well, let me know next time. Be standing out on the roadside and be waving. I'd be more than happy to.
That's what I saw riding.
Is there, but in any case, you know, it's not bad on Sunday mornings, you know. I mean, I had discussions with, now let me get the name, Frank, right? Your newly elected chairman. He and I he was the first person I talked to, and we had several conversations. Not lengthy, but talked a little bit about, you know, at least the general landscape of things and what you guys were looking for. And, I mean, he set certain goals for you that maybe he would be better to speak for rather than me trying to speak for him in his absence this morning. But, you know, he talked about, you know, some of the needs around what you're facing right now, the chartering, potential property, you know, things like that, and guiding people through that process, as well as Sunday morning. Obviously, other than that, as far as I know, your calendar is not full of activities that either exist or would require your presence. So it seems to me that, you know, Sunday morning obviously is the first goal. Next would be, you know, assisting as a consultant. There would be another term we might use for one of my roles in these various processes that you're presently, you know, in the midst of. Now, how long that would take, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine, you know, that's been talked about, that I would be present for, and I'm not entirely familiar with your structure, your governance structure, but obviously there are several committees, it seems, that do meet, that I presume, you know, might be helped by my presence. If indeed I was the one to be, you know, hired and called by you people. I want to add that each time. I assume nothing at this point, so.
I have two questions.
I'm gonna grab my water while you're.
Sure. How would you look to involve the youth, since it's they're present, in the process that you're taking us through? And also, the relationship with the ministry staff, whether they're paid or lay ministry staff, same question.
Well, I think the way you determine how you're gonna involve people is to meet with them directly and hear what their needs are, what their desires are, and then come to some agreement as to how I can meet those. I mean, quite directly. You know, I can't, you know, I've been pleased so far you haven't asked me now exactly what are you gonna do when you get here, because, you know, you've gotta be in the midst of the situation to determine that. And I would say that in regard to any interest group, age group among the congregation. You know, it's important for me to me or whoever fills the role, let me keep adding that, to meet with people, and they get to know me, I get to know them, and then, you know, we engage in a conversation around what can be done. You know, what's being done now, what can be done in addition or differently from that. I didn't understand the second part of the second question, Penny. I didn't.
So you've got ministry staff who are paid and ministry staff who are lay volunteers. Do you see them as another stakeholder group that you would approach the same way? Or is there something with the staff that's another layer of care for them almost?
I can answer that, but I'm still not quite certain what you're trying to get at. I don't know in working with them, but it would be my immediate concern to discriminate between who's paid and who isn't. If they're working for their Lord and they're fulfilling a role here, I would deal with them on that level rather than who's on the payroll and who isn't. I mean, to me, that's it's not insignificant, but it's not my greatest concern right now. And that's more up to you guys, you know, how you want to handle that. I can only answer that in kind of it might not satisfy you, but another general way. I mean, how would I deal with them? What would I do with them? I'd meet with them. It's, you know, I see, you know, where their roles are, and, you know, how I could assist and support them in those roles. That would be my goal. How can I support and encourage them in what they're already doing?
That's a great one.
Yes.
I'm not asking a good question.
Thank you. And before I do anything less than that, I'll be exiting to prepare for worship. I'll see you all there in a few minutes.
I think being asked what people want and then being willing to meet those needs is a wonderful answer.
I guess I've got a question. My question comes from a different perspective of our involvement in the community in the past as a congregation. And some of that involvement has been directly led by the pastor. One of those being partnership with the school district here, and worked very closely with the school district on a variety of different things. And clearly, while we've been in this transition, that communication that has not, it's just not been there, because there hasn't been a consistency in, you know, who's pastor. And obviously, as intentional interim, it could be a longer appointment. I mean, the amount of time that you're here, you know, we're talking months, right? You know, I guess I'm wondering how that role would play. You know, I know for the past several years, the pastor of the congregation has been asked by the student body to do baccalaureate. You know, in the past we've done
The annual service at the conclusion of the school year, you're talking about?
for the graduates.
Right,
For the
right, I
graduates,
understand, yeah.
Right. You know, and there's just a variety of different activities that we are pretty closely tied to the school district.
Mhm. Well, you for at least one obvious reason, I might, you know.
Yeah, we found a teacher.
Where we sit right now is, I guess, what I was referring to.
Yeah. You know, and I'm just curious as to how you see your role and partnerships like that. School's not the only one in the community. Northfield Human Services is a big one. And there's just a variety of those, and
I understand there's some difficulty with that, with the distance that you are away as well. You're in the community on a regular basis, you're here for services and other things. But I think those are relationships that during that intentional interim time do need a little bit of care. You know, because they're very important, I think, to the community and to the church. Well, how do you?
Listen, I'm okay. I heard one. I heard one.
Okay, I'm just making sure that.
No, I heard one. I'm prepared to answer this by object lesson. Let me see if I can do it. Give me a second here. There we go. Here we go. All right, here we go. Here's a potential contract between myself or another interim intentional minister. Here it is right here. It's a blank slate. Now, there's a kind of, in a sense, it's not a call maybe exactly as we would normally understand it, but there's a call document as well that the district provides. And there's a contract. But essentially, the contract starts, in my mind, albeit I have some requirement to fulfill, you know, the district's expectations, it starts as a blank sheet of paper. So essentially, you know, and I don't want to sound like too much of a dream of, I'm prepared to do pretty much anything at all what you guys want to do, but in some sense, I want to reflect that, and honestly, and what we need to do, whether it's me or someone else, and I would pray that person would approach it in the same manner. We need to sit down very quickly in the beginning and say, okay, what's the most important things that we see we would like to fulfill? I mean, let's you know, I like driving. Let's not worry about the commute, okay? I don't see that as an obstacle. You know, I've got dependable vehicle. You know, I mean, I'm not concerned about that. The question is, you know, we're all time limited to some degree, so we may have to make priorities. But if the school district or other community, you know, associations or relationships that have been conducted in the past are something that are important in the future, and I could see how they might be, then, you know, put them on the list. Put them on the list. So I'm certainly open to that, you know, and if it's something that you feel that it's something that for the pastor to conduct, then so be it. So be it.
Thank you.
I would just like to comment on that. That's an issue that it's been on my heart, who's been fulfilling those duties. And I'm not to let anybody off the hook, but it might just as well be someone in the community, the congregation, as to be the pastor. And I don't think a lot of people actually knew all of the things that Pastor Dan did to be part of the community. So we need to become aware of those and see if there's someone that can fill them who's going to be here long term.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I think identifying those relationships is a very important process that we need to go through. Then we can put him on his list.
You're in my sights. You're in my sights.
The problem is, you try to look you can only see me eye to eye sitting down.
Yes, I've already had that conversation with you on the hall. I noted that. Yes, I noted that.
And you gotta watch out for an uppercut swing.
I'm trying to imagine where that would land, and may I say nothing more about it than that.
In regard to family life ministry, we've had a family life minister, and that person is no longer with us. Are you prepared to help us to develop a family life ministry?
Sure.
Continue it?
I'm prepared to do, to assist you in whatever ways become necessary, if I become that person, all right? If I'm not immediately prepared, given my knowledge, my experience, my gifts, and my talents, I'll find that. And then we'll both, you as a congregation and myself, will have it at our grasp together. But I'm certainly prepared.
The intern, oh, go ahead.
No, I was.
No, I'm terrible, I joke all the time.
I was checking.
Oh, you did? Classic.
Now, see, that young man is wearing one of my allegiances.
Ah.
I was a little unhappy with the football season. But
Yeah, I was too.
I have real good friends in Omaha, and I don't know if, do you have some acquaintance with Nebraska?
No, just my dad was born like in Seward, Nebraska.
Oh, okay, very good, yeah. Yeah, but I have good friends in Omaha, who ended up in Omaha, so, they're very rabid about they have very few teams other than the collegiate team, so Nebraska sports is just everything to them, and, boy, don't get in the way of that. I don't even say anything against it at this distance, but, the football, it was a little.
It ended well at least.
It did, yeah, it did. Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted, where were we?
No, one of the things I noticed about the intern program is, and you had mentioned, is that you report to Dr. Casper. How does that dynamic work when you're our pastor, but you report to Dr. Casper?
I'm not sure because I haven't been in that situation yet. I've done interim ministry in the past, but not under his tutelage. So, you know, Dr. Casper is a straightforward but intense man. In some ways, much like I can be seen by people. Hopefully, each of us do smile at least a little bit to break the tension a bit. From the impression I've gotten from him thus far, it's like, you know, I've placed my confidence in you, now you go do it. That's, now Penny, that's just an impression I've gotten so far, but I'm not entirely, I don't lack in confidence that that wouldn't be the situation. I mean, essentially what he told me was, you know, I'm here for you if you need me, let me know. I see him more rather than to be dictating to me, someone who stands prepared to assist me. And of course, heaven knows, you know, talk about a short commute. That's a real short commute from here, isn't it? This general area down to his office, so. I don't, he's got a plenty busy schedule. I don't intend on utilizing that option very often, but obviously it's there, you know. Rob's very open to people contacting him. I mean, right away he said, here's my personal cell number. Use it if you need it. So, you know, I mean, there are plenty of people who might not do that. So, but I don't see him as, from what I can tell so far, heavily dictating to me. So long as things are reasonably progressing. He does require, I will tell you this, he does require, and I think I made a joke with you on the phone about that, the one difference I always say between vacancy, you know, pulpit supply, such as we might call it, vacancy fill-in, and IIM is the fact that IIM requires regular reports to be sent to the district. So I'll be regularly reporting to him. I mean, there's no getting around that. I mean, I almost got the sense that if the reports weren't received, they'd be looking you up pretty quickly. So, I mean, there is that, I do have that obligation, which I will be prepared to meet. But other than that, I don't see that. I see more as an assistance rather than someone that rather than someone who they need to answer to.
How has that relationship kind of worked in your past interim roles with the supervisor and being the pastor of a church at the same time?
Fairly easily, in the sense that, you know, I don't think anyone that I've, shall we say, worked under felt that it would be beneficial to the pastor or to the congregation to be watching them all too closely. It's more, they're, in some ways, it kind of goes down the ladder. I mean, you know, they want to enable me to do my best work. I want to enable the congregation that they can fulfill the goals that they set for themselves. So I've really never experienced it other than, in a manner of speaking, an enabling type of role. Okay. Except when the reports are late. Then they start calling when the reports are late.
Sam is our interim from Concordia pre-seminary student.
Oh, marvelous.
So we have typically, as a congregation, been committed to having, are you called pre-seminary students? I mean, is that the title?
Yeah.
Having them, and Sam just preached with us, and he works in a variety of roles. So that's something that we would we would love to continue.
Well, certainly, certainly. That's a resource. It's quite, that's a short commute. Well, God bless you in that. God bless you in that.
Thank you.
How far along are you?
I'm a sophomore this year.
Oh, you got a ways to go.
Yeah, I got a ways to go.
Okay. Well, very good. God bless.
Well, if anyone has any more questions, we'll probably break in 5 minutes to give Pastor Prout time to transition to the service.
Yeah, I've got a whole lot of questions, so I've got to find some people very quickly. So.
All right. Any kids, do you have any questions?
I have a quick one.
Yeah, love it.
Okay, what kind of things like really energize you in ministry, and what kind of things are just kind of drain your energy and you really prefer not to do them?
I can answer the latter one more quickly than the first.
Okay.
Paperwork.
Paperwork?
What energizes me the most? This is going to be kind of redundant to say it this way, but to see congregations energized. To see the Spirit through the Word fill congregations with an excitement about what they want to do, that they have a clear vision, and they go out and conduct themselves in it. I mean, you know, we look to pastors to do quite a bit, but what's for lack of a better term, what's the bottom line here? To energize people for ministry. If not with a big M, with a small m. And that's not to minimize it, that's not to lessen it, but to energize people in their lives to conduct themselves in ministry for their Lord in His name. That's and you see it a certain amount of the time. I don't always see it as often as I like to, but I have experienced it. It is marvelous. It's marvelous. You want to hear about paperwork though? That's the really bad part. Reports, I've already given the impression, Evan, that I don't like reports, but they're necessary.
Well, thank you very much.
You know, but it's a Bible class. Shouldn't we read the Bible? I'm prepared to do that.
Well, in the last 3 minutes, I was going to ask Peter to pray over you.
That's fine too. That's fine too.
For moving
I want you to know though, I brought a Bible into the room and I was prepared to read it. So it doesn't require applause, but that's fine. If that is something you'd want to end the hour on, that's fine. Please go right on ahead.
We typically do, and now Peter's an elder. He's in the unfortunate position of being surprised with his request for prayer.
Are there other elders?
Sorry about that.
I'm the junior.
Junior elder is as good as any other.
But your God is the same as all the rest of ours.
Okay, well, let us pray. Lord Jesus, we just thank you, first of all, the opportunity to gather together to worship you, Lord. And we welcome this morning Pastor David, and who is joining us to search whether we're a congregation that he needs to lead in the next months. And we thank Lord that he has been willing to come here and answer many questions, and in a few minutes preach the gospel. So we ask you, Lord, blessings on him and his travels, and we ask you, Lord, that he will be filled by the Holy Spirit and the words that he has for us later on. We pray for each person here that we will be satisfied with the answers, that we've asked all the questions that we would of him, and that we leave, Lord, filled with your grace. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you.
Youth, back with you through quickly.
Oh my God, for David.